God showed up in a big way, and he began proving these obsessions wrong one at a time. So with my God obsession, I had the thoughts that how can a loving God create me to suffer this way? This wasn't loving, this was torture. And so I really began to question my faith because it just wasn't adding up to me. I would research other religions on the internet, which led me to get even more confused. So one night after researching, I was desperate and I cried out, God, I don't know who you are. I believe that you hear me. I need a sign. I need something that the devil can't take and twist and use against me. I need to hear from you. And the next morning in my devotional, the focus verse from the Bible was Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. It felt like a breath of fresh air. I felt like God was speaking to me.
As a woman of faith, I feel called to have difficult but necessary conversations in my podcast show. However, I want to offer a sincere heads up that this episode addresses painful topics. If you've endured assault, abuse, or other trauma, please do care for yourself and only listen if you feel emotionally able to do so. Although meant to heal and empower, reliving these realities can be triggering and re-traumatizing if you're not in the right space. Please do take your time with the hard story that we're sharing. Pause or step away whenever needed. My prayers are with anyone hurting, and I'm here to listen and support you.
You're listening to Altered Stories with Michelle Renee Gutch.
Happy February, Altered Story Show listeners, and welcome to my season 4, episode 150. Woohoo! Featuring my special guest here, Marin Canaday, who is sharing her freedom from the chains of obsessive compulsive disorder God story. This is your chief storyteller host, friends, Michelle Saunders Gutch, and thank you for listening and watching my show that helps Christian women like Marin share their God stories so women around the world can hear them and never feel alone. If one of our stories has blessed you, do bless us by subscribing to the show and sharing the episodes. Or you can purchase a 52-week podcast episode digital Devo or any of our awesome items from our online store from our website, or you can donate to Altered Stories Ministry to pay it forward and help another woman share her God story. Friends, I hope your 2025 is going well. Can you believe that January has come and gone? Before I start the show, though, I wanted to express my heartfelt thanks to all of you listeners who've been praying for me for my health recovery. I am back and I'm on the mend. And I'm excited to share, friends, that Altered Stories show and Altered Stories Ministry will be 6 years old on Wednesday, February 12th. I am so excited. And I'd love for you to give us a shout out on our social media platforms. One last update, and thank you, Marin, for being so patient here as I share. I'm hosting a Mental Health Monday promo live on our YouTube channel, and we're trying to do this every other Monday. And we feature our mental health licensed counselor and ministry partner, Sherry Puckett. And so I am going to be sharing when our next date will be, and Sherry and I are going to talk about stress management and what the Bible tells us about how to best manage stress. And you'll be able to find that link on my Altered Story Show Facebook page. So now let's get this show started. And I am so excited to be bringing Marin Canaday to you. She is a referral from Kadosh Media, who is actually our production team. Thank you, Teresa Blaze and Michael, for helping me with this wonderful guest and the referral. Now, Marin is a Christ follower, friends. She's a stay-home mom, speaker, and author of 2 children picture books, and her second book, The Very Best Me, was recognized by the Child Mind Institute as one of the best children's books on mental health for 2024. That is an incredible honor, and what a great accomplishment there. She's also a podcaster and has fought obsessive compulsive disorder, also known as OCD, since early childhood. And she is passionate about reaching out to others with the hope that God restored in her life. So, welcome to the Altered Stories Show. Marin, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's wonderful. I've loved talking with you and getting to know you. Can you just share a quick fun fact about yourself?
Fun fact, I love to crochet.
Wow. Is that something you do often, or
Whenever my hands need to be busy and keep my mind at peace, I like to pick up a baby blanket and crochet for any new babies in the church or friends and just put them away for later if I need to, but I always try and stay busy crocheting.
oh my gosh, I'd love to pick that up again. Oh, that's so cool. So one thing I did want to mention, and we always love hearing from our guests about why they believe Christian women should be sharing their testimonies, their
Mhm.
personal God stories.
Yes.
I would like to hear from you. Why do you think it's important for Christian women to share their God stories?
You know, in my journey, I lost sight of hope very quickly. And I think it's important to share your God story so that other people around you who are suffering, who you may not even know are struggling, can have hope from hearing that what God has done in your life and know that He can do it in your life too.
Yeah. Well, I know all of us have probably had a story that's really impacted us,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd love to hear from you. Is there one story that you've heard that really affected you?
You know what? Corey Ten Boom is one of my favorites, and just her incredible strength through such hard times and her determination to follow Christ and to do what was right, even in times where everybody was telling them that it was wrong, and to stand up for the Jews and to protect them and house them in her home. And I actually got the chance to go to her house and see the closet where she hid the Jews. And oh, that was just such
Wow.
an awesome time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I have really followed her off and on
Mhm.
because, she has such incredible
Yeah.
quotes, and
Mm-hmm.
they're very impacting. And of
Yes.
course, I've watched her stories too. There's been a variety of different ones,
Yes.
but thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I also would love um, for you to talk to us a little bit about what kind of these books, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and we'll talk about this as we go through your freedom from the chains of obsessive compulsive disorder, God's
Mm-hmm.
story. But did you have a writing background, uh,
No.
Marin?
No, I did not. Actually, I had dabbled in it a little bit in my early college years, thinking, I'd like to be a children's book writer. And I went to a writer's workshop, and my ideas were not thrilling to them. And so I thought, well, maybe God's leading me in a different direction. Maybe I need to be a teacher and stick to my profession. And so I ditched it altogether until, as you'll hear in my story, God brought it all back and He gave it to me again and said, I've got something that I want you to write.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into now you starting through your God story. And
Okay.
I ask this of all my guests, and you've got plenty of time,
Okay.
and you can pause, you can do what you need to do. There's a lot there.
Yes.
But Marin, where does your freedom from the chains of obsessive compulsive disorder God story begin? Walk us through there, and
Sure.
then what brought you to where you are and the transformation
Yes.
that God has made in your life.
Yes. It's been a definite transformation. So I grew up in a Christian home. We were at church every Sunday, Awanas midweek for Bible memorization. And through an Awana event, I accepted Christ early in my childhood. But then the devil began to twist the salvation message in my young mind with lies like there's no excuse for bad choices now. You're forgiven. You're saved. Now you need to live up to it. There's no excuses for mistakes. And so I became afraid of being a bad person. And my anxiety looked like perfectionism in my early childhood. It revolved around behaving just right. I was extra kind. I was extra obedient. I would tell on myself for any little mistake. I was constantly seeking reassurance that I was okay, that I was forgiven. And quite honestly, I felt like my life just needed to stop or end if I made a mistake. And I can see now that was the devil trying to silence me from an early age. And that faulty thinking would grow and multiply into my adult years. So at the time, I didn't know that I was fighting OCD.
Yeah.
My parents and my teachers thought I was just a worrywart. I was a kid who maybe just needed some extra reassurance. But what I've come to understand about OCD is that it's also called the doubting disorder. Uncertainty gets stuck in your head and it gets stuck on replay, and it must be proven wrong in order to be released from it. So you feel like you have to prove it 200% wrong in order to move on. And for me, in my adult years, I felt like God himself had to prove it wrong in order for me to move on. So in junior high, I had my first serious episode with OCD, and it revolved around germs. I had the uncertainty get stuck in my mind that if my germs were to transfer to somebody else, it would kill them and I would be a murderer. I couldn't prove that uncertainty wrong 100%, 200%, because it could happen. Somebody could catch my germs and die. And so I began to wash my hands obsessively. My mom was very worried that I would wash so much that they would bleed. But for me, germs were just everywhere. And I didn't want to be responsible for passing my germs on to somebody else. So during this time, my mom became my voice that would speak truth to the lies. I depended on her to release me from my fears. She was the rational thinker that would say, hey, that doesn't make sense. Have you thought about this? What about this? If you were to kill someone with your germs, that would be a complete accident. Look how careful you're being washing your hands. And more than one episode, she has resolved for me because of her truth and her rationale and the words that she spoke to me, which kind of became a problem for me as an adult because I would focus on my mom being my little G God. She was the one that I would run to for answers instead of running to God. She became that person that I looked to for relief rather than depending on God. And I would have to learn as an adult that God is the one who has power over my mental illness and has the truth that will set me free. So in high school, I had various other obsessions, and the one that sticks out to me was religious obsessions, doubting that the Bible is true. I had signed up to get baptized and then talked my way out of it with the pastor saying, I have all these doubts. I really don't think I should be going through with this right now. I was very ashamed. I was afraid that people would think less of me for doubting. It really affected my appetite. I got very skinny. It did not affect my sleep at the time, which would have been the red flag for my parents talking to them as an adult now. If it would have affected my sleep, they would have taken me in knowing that something deeper was going on. But at the time, it just still appeared that I was a worrywart. So high school was the first time suicide truly became a desire for me. I was miserable with the constant thought war of trying to fight the devil's lies and doubts. But then thinking rationally, I thought to myself, how can I kill myself? If I die, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know if there's a heaven or a hell waiting for me. I don't know if there's a God waiting to love me with open arms or if I'm going to see the devil. And so I put that out of my mind and I just kept fighting on. And in school, I found relief in hiding in sports and studying. My perfectionism OCD extended to my grades. I had to get the A. I was bad if I didn't work hard enough, I felt like. My parents, on the other hand, did not feel this way at all. They were going to give me a party if I got a B or anything else. And I just couldn't do it. I knew that I had to work hard enough to get the A, and anything less was shameful. And so I got a perfect grade point average in high school and then in college. And then I went on and I earned a full ride scholarship to Fresno Pacific University to play volleyball. I was very thankful for volleyball because it gave me a lot of relief from the anxiety and the tension that came with it. I could put my worries on hold and I could just play. And so my college years were wonderful. They were relatively free from OCD. The obsessions that I did have, I could manage on my own. I was confident that I was leaving anxiety behind me. I was going to recreate myself to be confident, courageous. I was sick of fear. I was sick of being a coward in my mind. I was going to be normal and leave the weird worrying behind. During this time, I met my husband and we got married, and I juggled college and grades and volleyball and marriage with confidence. We had 3 girls, and I continued to juggle, but the stresses of life were catching up with me. When my youngest turned 1, anxiety was back, and there was no volleyball and no studying to hide in, and I became very, very ill. Prior to this episode happening, I would lay my kids down for bed, and I would sit outside their door while they settled down, and I would read news stories. And the news story that got stuck on repeat in my head was a child abuse story. But the devil twisted it, and somehow I became the culprit. How could I prove 100% wrong that I would not become a predator to my own children? Innocent touch became wrong to me. I had to inspect and rationalize each touch. I would mentally freeze and replay the touch to reassure that nothing inappropriate had happened. Things like changing a diaper. If my hand touched Bear's skin, I felt like I was a predator. Drying a wiggly child off after a bath. If my hand touched their bare skin, I felt like I was a predator. The 5-point harness for a car seat, buckled in between the legs. I couldn't do it. My OCD would scream at me that you are sick. So I taught my oldest daughter how to buckle in the baby, and I would check at the shoulder straps to ensure that she was secure. My life was just turned completely upside down. I had obsessions 24/7. It was hard to eat. It was hard to sleep. It was hard to care for my children. I really depended on my family during this time. My mom and my sister came in and they carried me through this, and they stepped in to care for my children as I withdrew and really focused just on fighting the thoughts in my head. The devil tormented me with thoughts that you're going to go crazy. Without food, without sleep, you're going to go crazy and snap and do the very things that you don't want to do. I would pace the floor, running from the thoughts. I was very agitated. I couldn't sit still. I lost a lot of weight very quickly. The lies and the thoughts got so loud that I would have to talk back to them out loud. I really, truly felt that I was going crazy. And to me, the only way out was death, because I would rather hurt myself than my children. And I believed that lie. And it's such a lie. There's no truth in it. I became obsessed with death. It was all that I could think about. And so I reached out for help. And I began seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist, and I began medication. During this time, I was hospitalized. Um, it was it was no fun being on a 5150. It was traumatizing. They told me you can't go home, and I just looked at them blankly. I'd never even heard of a 5150. What do you mean I can't go home? That's all I want to do. I was so afraid of the people I would be hospitalized with. I was shaking so badly that they thought I was on drugs. I remember crying out in desperation, Lord, fill this room so that no evil can abide in it. And he did. Peace just washed over me, and I was able to sleep for 4 hours. God alone helped me sleep. My body was on full alert. After I was released, I continued to struggle, but after months of careful living, it dawned on me. Look how careful you're being to protect your children. You're going to the extreme measures to ensure that you never hurt them. And it just clicked in my mind that the devil could not make me do anything that I did not want to do. And I was released from that predator obsession for a while. I never got a clear diagnosis during this time that I was OCD. So I began to make excuses, excuse it away. Maybe it was postpartum depression a year late. Maybe it was a midlife crisis. Maybe I defeated anxiety. So I stopped therapy and I stopped going to a psychiatrist, and I took a starter pack and I went off of my medication, which I would never, ever try again. And I would never tell anybody else to do. And 2 years later, I was sicker than I'd ever been sick before. This time, I just felt no hope immediately. I knew this was a life struggle. I had so many different obsessions. What if my mom dies and I had no help for my OCD? What if I was a violent person and a predator again? What if I had to work to support my family? I wouldn't be able to with these OCD thoughts getting stuck in my head. And what if there isn't a loving God and I'm going to hell? And my mind would bounce between these obsessions, trying to solve them one at a time. But that's where my story gets exciting, because God showed up in a big way, and he began proving these obsessions wrong one at a time. So with my God obsession, I had the thoughts that how can a loving God create me to suffer this way? This wasn't loving, this was torture. And so I really began to question my faith because it just wasn't adding up to me. I would research other religions on the internet, which led me to get even more confused. So one night after researching, I was desperate and I cried out, God, I don't know who you are. I believe that you hear me. I need a sign. I need something that the devil can't take and twist and use against me. I need to hear from you. And the next morning in my devotional, the focus verse from the Bible was Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. It felt like a breath of fresh air. I felt like God was speaking to me. But you have to understand that this was a long illness. It was not something that just ended overnight. So I began to doubt that promise. Did he mean that he was only going to help me that one day for that one battle? Did he mean that he was going to see this through to the end? This episode just continued to stretch on, and I just felt like I couldn't last. I started therapy and psychiatry again, and new medications. And medications can be very frustrating because when you start, you have to find the right one for you. Not everything is going to work. When the first one didn't work for me, I immediately was very suicidal again. I can't last. I can't do this anymore. I told myself, I'm going to take my life, and it's going to be today. Well, God had spoken to me once before in a devotional, so I thought maybe I'll go check my devotional. Maybe I'll go see what God has to tell me today. And so I went to my devotional, and the verse was Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it gave me strength for another day. Now, when my mind was not on my God obsession, it was on the violent predator obsessions. I had such disturbing thoughts and such disturbing visions in my mind that it would send me to the bathroom to dry heave. When that would happen, I knew I needed to put truth into my mind. I needed to hear God's voice. And so I would return to the kitchen to turn on the Christian radio station. And the first time this happened, Zach Williams' song, Fear is a Liar, was playing. And it goes like this: Fear, he is a liar. He will take your breath, stop you in your steps. Fear, he is a liar. He will rob your rest, steal your happiness. Cast your fear in the fire, because fear, he is a liar. Now, the first time I took notice, and that was nice. But then it happened again and again. I would be obsessing, dry heaving in the bathroom, run out to my Christian radio station, turn it on, and the exact same song would be playing. And I truly began to believe that God was talking to me. And this was the proof that I needed to hear from God that these lies were just that, lies. And what do I do with them? Cast your fear in the fire. And so that's what I did with these lies. I knew God was telling me, this is not you, this is not truth. And so my second episode, I finally received a diagnosis at 32 that I was fighting obsessive compulsive disorder. And the thoughts were normal for OCD. Now, during this episode, in the thick of my fears, I did end up trying to make an attempt on my life and try to attempt suicide, even in spite of God's encouragement. I believed the lie that I just could not last. This episode lasted about 3 years altogether, and I was ready to be done. I was ready to be with Jesus. I was tired of trying to appear normal. I was afraid that my illness was becoming apparent to others. Once again, I was hospitalized and placed on a 5150. After I was released, and as I recovered emotionally from my suicide attempt, I didn't feel like God could still use me. I was very ashamed, and I thought that God would hold it against me. But that's when God surprised me and gave me a great big hug. And he did that by giving me the inspiration for a book. I had the idea to portray my OCD as a monster who sits on my shoulder and does its best to distract me with lies. And this monster grows bigger and bigger and takes control when I listen to it. The poem for this book just seemed to flow out of me. I wrote it in less than 30 minutes. And then I just felt this come over me that I needed to do something with this story. It wasn't just meant to be for me. And so I Googled publishers and I sent it to one that I found, the first one. And the person receiving my email was OCD herself and loved the idea. God provided the money to publish with this publisher, and all the details just fell into place. I just felt like God's love was extended to me. And that's when I really started improving. It showed me that he still had a plan for me and that I was a part of it and that I had a new purpose and he had a new job for me. I am to encourage those around me struggling with OCD. I am to tell them what God has done for me and to share that there is hope in Jesus. Now, when I published my books, that meant that I would now have to start speaking about my OCD, which is something that I desperately had avoided. As a matter of fact, that's why I tried to attempt suicide in the first place, because I didn't want anybody to know. My own siblings didn't know I struggled with anxiety until my 30s. It was a war that was very internal that I fought alone and sometimes let my parents in on it. On the day of my testimony at church, I had another devotional, and it read Romans 8:28 from the Bible. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And the devotional part by Christine Kane went on to say, when, not if, your world is turned upside down, Know that you will be sustained. No disaster is too devastating for God to reach out with his loving hand and comfort you and unimaginably make it work for his purposes. So I have found in my walk that God has been very patient with me and my OCD. He's not afraid of my doubts. He's not afraid of my thoughts. He's not afraid of my fears. In fact, he took the time to answer again and again and again and to prove himself to me, even though I didn't deserve it. He's forgiven me and comforted me as well. And he has given me a new life purpose. And that's why I'm here today, because I wanted to share that hope with others, share what God has done for me, and to encourage people who are fighting against anxiety, against OCD, that there is hope.
Yeah. You have done an incredible job of sharing your God story,
Oh, thank you.
Marin. There is a lot there,
Yes.
and it's deeply personal.
Yes.
But praise God, he has transformed you,
Yes, he has.
and you are now instrumental in helping to transform others who are
Yes.
going through this. Now, your books,
Mm-hmm.
okay, tell me, are they for people, are they just for children? Are they for parents, for resources
Okay.
to help them
Mhm.
understand? Can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. So I wrote my books as children's picture books. And so they really apply to all ages, though. I used my first book to talk to my children and tell them what I was struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
So they can be instrumental to any age, but they are written in short poem. And so it makes most sense to use it with a child, you know. And then my second book, it really speaks to the people helping the child with the OCD to come along beside them and to share ideas for what I found helpful when I was in the thick of it. You know, stay by my side, be a supportive presence, whisper the truth to me. You may have to whisper again and again and again because it may be God that I'm waiting on hearing the answer from, but don't stop whispering. Keep telling me the truth. Don't make me feel silly or less than because of my fears. And don't get angry because the voice in my head is so angry and shouting at me that any extra anger and impatience makes it magnified. And be calm, be loving, and be there. And, you know, I want to tell parents don't be afraid to bring in the therapist and the psychiatrist and to reach out for help. I didn't have that. That wasn't part of my story until my adult years. And I think things would have made a lot more sense if I had started earlier.
Yeah, well, this whole topic, I mean, there's different levels of OCD, right?
Yes, yes.
And this sounds, from what you've shared with me prior to our discussion today, like a assault, a outright attack
Mm-hmm.
from the enemy on the calling that he has had for your life
Yes,
as a wife, a mother, a podcaster, an author, all those things to try to keep you from walking fully in your calling,
right.
and then also um the whole struggle, the struggle, it was almost like God just had to keep showing up. He had to keep
Mm-hmm.
showing up. He had to keep showing up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the whole transformative piece of this is when you were able to get, I guess, the victory
And the trust
over
because
over that.
yes, it really became a struggle for trust because I had this faulty thought in my mind that God was trying to sink me, that I had done something wrong, and that by giving me OCD, he was angry with me. He was out to get me. And through him showing up again and again and again, the trust started building. God is not against me. God is for me. The devil is twisting the Bible, and he's telling me everything that God is not. And he's not only telling me, he's shouting at me, but God is whispering. And I can listen to that whisper, and I can trust that whisper. And that's what I really had to learn, that I can trust God no matter what. And I've been through some pretty tough things since then. And God has continued to give me verses. Do not fear, for I am with you. Be strong, be courageous. And I just feel like I can do that now. I don't have to slip back into the OCD fears. Yes, they are there, but I know that God is going to carry it for me, and he's going to fight that battle for me. I don't have to fight it on my own.
Yeah, I think a lot of anxiety, Marin, is based out of fear,
Mm-hmm.
control,
Yes.
those things that hold us captive
Yes.
in our ability to walk in the freedom that Jesus Christ has for us,
Mm-hmm.
being made in his image as believers, to be able to have the peace that
Yeah.
God intended us to have as we live on this earth. I mean, all these other things can be swirling around us, right?
Yes.
But having that core and having that peace that passes all
Understanding.
understanding,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and to be able to lean into that is so powerful.
Yes.
I am just so grateful to God that you are where you are.
Me too.
I mean, as we talked, I know that you said there's some, things that had transpired, and you're building trust where you
Mm-hmm.
lost trust, right?
Right.
With your children or in
Mm-hmm.
areas. And that is no different
Mm-hmm.
than what God, does with us,
Mm-hmm.
when we don't seem to think that he's doing what
Needs
we
to be done. Yeah.
need to have. So this is such a great God story, and I'm just so grateful um, that you were recognized for this and your books. And I just would like you to also share any last words with our listeners, and also how can people get a hold of your books?
Sure. So the last words I'd like to leave with you as a Bible verse, 2 Corinthians 2:4. He comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. God comforted me over and over again. And so now I'm passing it on. And I pray that others are comforted by my story and find hope and strength to carry on, and that they too will then share their God stories. My books can be found on Amazon. I have my first book called My Little Monster, a story about OCD. And the second book is The Very Best Me.
Okay, well, thank you again, friends. We were going to, get this out there on our website where you can find more information about Marin and her books and all of that. So we'll make sure that we get all of the necessary things out there so you can also reach out to her if you need to. I mean, she is a great resource, and a godly woman who has such a testimony of God's just coming in and making a change in her peace
Mm-hmm.
and comforting her. And that we need so much.
Yes.
And now, friends, it's time to hear from our mental health counselor, uh, licensed counselor, Sherry Puckett. And she's also a ministry partner, and she's going to share a mental health tip.
Hello, friends. This is Sherry Puckett, licensed professional counselor. And today I want to talk about a method that is often used. I've used it myself, in counseling sessions, whenever someone comes into your office and they are what we call flooded, maybe they're very upset, their mind is racing, their heart is beating super fast. And when they're in that state, it's very, very difficult to get any counseling done. They're just too escalated emotionally. And so counselors will often use a technique called grounding. And grounding is just a way to help people calm down and focus on something different. For example, a client comes into my office and he's highly escalated and he's upset and his hands are shaking, his voice is quivering, and he's just off the charts, very, very escalated. So I might say, why don't you have a seat? And he's still talking, and I will give him a cup of coffee. And while he's holding the coffee, for that moment, his mind is fixated on the warmth in his hands or the smell, the aroma of the coffee. All of a sudden, he's grounded. He's becoming grounded. And as he sips on that coffee and smells the aroma of the coffee, then we can start to have a conversation. He's grounded now. His mind is still on what's going on in his life, but the coffee helps him to calm down, and his senses are focused on the coffee, the smell, the warmth of the coffee, so his senses are engaged in something different, which helps him to focus and calm down, and we can have a counseling session. And you may be wondering, why am I sharing this with you? Because I believe that God wants our thoughts to be grounded in Him. And with everything going on in the world today, we're all a little bit escalated from time to time. There's a lot going on, wars and rumors of wars, as the Bible talks about. There's the political unrest and social unrest, and there's just so much going on. But Isaiah 26:3 says, you will keep him, meaning God will keep you in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you. Because, and that's a big because he trusts in you. And then we see in John 14:27, Jesus says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So how do we ground ourselves in Jesus? That is the question. Listen, you can do this. One of the things I recommend is every single day, wake up with worship. And I don't mean you have to go and turn the radio on or whatever. No, within your heart, have this mindset. God, I thank you for another day. I thank you for the sunrise. I thank you for, let your mouth be filled with praise. That's a way of getting your mind off of all the calamity and onto a loving Heavenly Father. And then throughout the day, begin to meditate. And I believe in meditating on Scripture, but there's a cause, there's a purpose why we meditate on Scripture. Meditate on the character of God. So you're at work, something goes horribly wrong, and you're like, oh God, I'm so thankful that you're a loving Father, and I can run to you with even this when my project did not turn out right or was not what my boss wanted from me. I know that you are with me, and you'll give me the wisdom even now. In other words, you're grounded in the character of God. I hope that makes sense, and I look forward to talking to you guys again very soon. Remember, ground yourself in Jesus, and He will give you peace that only He can give. All right. Thank you so much.
And thank you again, Marin, for taking the time. God bless you. We'll be praying for you.
Thank you.
We want to support you and all that you're doing in this area.
Thank
And
you.
until the next show, friends, be heard and be healed.
Altered Stories Ministry is a faith-based, nonprofit, and women's evangelistic storytelling ministry. If you enjoyed listening to today's story, your family and friends would probably benefit from hearing how God works in the lives of women all over the world, too. So please, subscribe to our show and share the link to this podcast. Share it on your social media. We also welcome your valued feedback on our stories. Also, we'd appreciate your prayerful consideration in sponsoring one of our future God-glorifying stories and welcome your tax-exempt financial donation. To find out more on how you can support our ministry, you can log on to our website at www.alteredstories.org.